Video is dedicated to top 15 questions. I have two guest hosts today. They're from the official Discord. Feel free to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Nico Plinick.
And I'm Bemko Spy.
How long have you guys been playing? Just if you mind me asking.
We had like a whole month over everybody in global with soft launch.
Yeah.
So now we're at like 7 weeks now, 6-7 weeks.
Wow.
Day 40, I think. Day 40 to 45, somewhere in there.
I'm a jelly donut.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. All those resources, man.
Yeah, and we're hard gated. Like we're struggling. Like it gets real bad in the future, guys. It doesn't get any better with resources. If anything, it gets worse. So
We're not supposed to tell
that's why
you
we're
that.
letting you guys know now to be using your stuff on resources because
makes
we
sense,
know how
though.
bad it's gonna get.
All right. So today's 15 questions. Let's go ahead and get this started. First one's going to be, who is the best leader for free to play?
Okay, so that one's a little bit of a tricky question. When you start out, you have access to none of the leaders except one. So you're going to be stuck with the first red leader. Once you get to chapter around 9, you're going to unlock the hunter rogue leader. And once you get to chapter 13, you're going to unlock the coffin leader, which is the one you want as a free to play. You'll unlock paladin in between that. But you just want to ignore them. So just focus on building units that help you in both rogue and coffin leader to just set yourself up for that.
I think for me, for some reason in the beginning, I was super obsessed with like the leader passives, but in the future, like in the beginning, I know that's not too important. But let's jump into the next thing. What's going to be the easiest comp to build in the beginning as a free to play?
So the easiest comp to build, again, if it's endgame, you want to build the coffin leader and build a sort comp with him. A lot of free to play players are sorcerers, so you just want to start building some of the units early and do whatever you can that fit to the rogue passives when you unlock him, and just set yourself up to have to build the least amount of units when you unlock the coffin leader, because that'll be your best budget friendly build for sure, and it's really OP and strong anyways.
Yeah, I have to say, as soon as I got the sword leader, my life pretty much changed. Of course, it all takes time, so no rush there. Next question. What is the hardest team comp to technically build?
Yeah, this one's going to be a toss-up between your paladin or your spirit healer. Now, the spirit healer has an interesting caveat where basically 8 of your slots in that team are already taken up due to the passives needing a set amount of units. So if you don't have those units, it's very difficult to make it work. That's why I'm saying it's hard. The other one's probably the Paladin. The Paladin is probably a leader where you can play a little bit more with unit costs. You want to try and get it around 14 and start utilizing passives that require units costing more than 14 and lower. If you hit the perfect spot, 14, you can utilize both. But that's difficult to make a team to accommodate those two things.
That makes sense. Because energy is like a huge part of Illusion Connect. Being able to even cast a unit at the correct time is pretty much what gives me most of the time when I'm running stuff, because energy is a big thing, and be like, oh, I can't cast this unit because I don't have enough energy. All right, next question. What is technically the best banner to pull on?
There's 2 things that make up a good banner. Number one, if it's a waifu or husbando unit, then it's always a good banner to pull on. The second one being, you want to look for strong units that fit your comp. If you're building a sword comp and there's this really good tank unit coming out, this guardian unit, and there's just really isn't a slot for a guardian, you're fine with your Selena or your Karaya, then don't pull on him if you're free to play. Save for a really good sword unit that's going to improve your comp, because if not, you're just wasting those limited tickets that are hard enough to come by already.
Okay, that makes sense. So pretty much just save for the limited banners and pull on the banners that you see pretty much affecting your team greatly in the future. Like, for example, a really good mage that you see in the future, or for example, the Kasumi banners. So pretty much you dedicate your resources based off of the team that you think you're going to build in the future based off of your leader. Something like that, right? Let's go to the next one. What is the best thing to technically save for your pretty much, summons and everything? And I think you sort of alluded to this, but, feel free to say which ones are technically the best banners to save for.
Again, the best banners to save for are really the ones that fit with your team comp. But like if you are full free to play and you're spending limited tickets on limited banners, the best bang for your buck would be to only spend 20 limited tickets, because when you do your first 20 pulls, you're guaranteed an SSR unit. So what you could do is every time a new banner comes out, just do 20 pulls and get a guaranteed SSR, and you have a 40% chance to get the banner unit within those 20 pulls. So those are really good odds, and it's the best way to just acquire a ton of SSRs. So I wouldn't go too deep into the into a banner unless you're a dolphin and you really want to get those 70 pulls to get the guaranteed banner unit.
That makes sense. And you brought this in our previous conversations, where you don't really need like dupes in the sense from limited banners because they're so expensive. You're pretty much going to acquire shards and everything as you play like Illusion Corridor and all the different game modes. So honestly, like dupes and everything come with time, and it's better just to save for things that you know that you can get or know that you can at least get an SSR, so you can pretty much build your roster over time. Let's roll on to this question, which is like super simple. Where do you get weapon material upgrades? Because a lot of people have actually been struggling with this for some reason. I think maybe it's not explicitly said in the game. So
Do you want to take this one, Bamco?
Yeah, so weapon materials, the bulk of them, probably like 95% of your weapon materials will come from exploration. So if you're only doing one exploration a day just to get the rec rewards, you might want to consider doing a couple more just to pick up those weapon materials.
all right, let's go to the next one. What do you do when you guys get stuck? I'm going to provide my input for this one. So pretty much what I do when I get stuck is I pretty much go straight to daily trials, because usually it's like a resource like lock on like, hey, do I have enough gold? Hey, do I have enough like EXP materials? Hey, is my leader like upgraded? Just stuff like that. It's like those nuances. So usually my first place to go and look is like daily trials. How about y'all?
When I first hit a wall, the first thing that I do before I even look at resources is, am I playing the stage correctly? And I try and I'll hit my head against the wall a few times and try out different combos and strats with the units that I have to see if I can just overcome it
Makes
by
sense.
strategy first to unlock the resources to boost my power. If not, like you said, daily trials, you want to get those resources, level your units. But there are a few gates that happen where your units are max level and you have to get through the wall just to get the next setup of materials to upgrade. And the best thing you could do there is you have to play a good strategy and not just auto, and make sure you're smart about what you play and how you play it. But if not, like you said, daily trials, best thing you can do, honestly, to upgrade. Lens upgrade, it's another thing with dupes. So upgrading your SSRs and R units are going to help you clear that. And if you got some lucky dupes for your SSR units, then that'll help as well. So, and upgrading gear as well.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like when I first started out, I didn't even look at gear in the beginning. And most of the time, I was just like, man, I need a summon. But in the end, it really does boil down, can you strategize? And can you get those units in the right places? Sometimes you just don't draw the right cards for that perfect time, because you already know almost in your head what to place in order to overcome the stage as you go through it multiple times. Bamco, do you have anything for this one as well?
Yeah. It's being creative and being aware of what units do. So probably by around chapter 5, maybe chapter 6, most people will start having to retry some stages to pass them, especially in collapsed. Just be aware sometimes that AoE can really set you back if there's units like Frantiva, or if there's other units that spawn units on death. Sometimes just going down the middle line is the best way. So be creative.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. For Tiva, for some reason, what an absolute beast during like dreams and stories. All right, let's cover the next thing, and this pretty much goes to the previous question we just had. What do you do to essentially push story? Because I feel like most of the time when you're stuck on content, it usually has something to do with story. So
kind of like what I covered before, and Bamco said as well. It's like really paying attention to your units, really understanding what they do, knowing that each stages have different roadblocks that you're hitting. If the roadblock of, like, I don't know, for example, I hit this mission later on in like a later chapter where this unit, Frantiva, it was around chapter, I think, 16. Where she would keep using her special and her health would keep multiplying. She got to a point where she got 5 million health. So the point was to like aggro it down as fast as possible so she doesn't get to a point where she's using those specials. It was also leaving the board full, so she wasn't summoning more Frantiva. So all I did was leave the middle row empty so I can just keep shoving attackers in the middle. So it stopped other Frantivas acting as blockers whenever they would die, so she could keep spamming ults off to reduce the amount of time she can do that. So sometimes the strategy doesn't come into how you summon your units, but it's how you control their board and what you kill. There are a few stages where it's actually better not to kill everything. If they have like those weak fodder units at the beginning, leave them there. They're actually useless. They do nothing. And you could just leave the middle row open and just go ham on that. Every time something dies, just rinse and replace.
I love those dudes. They really help me out. Like, they really do help. Bamco, you have anything for that one?
Yeah, if you've got one unit that's like super geared, you can even put them up front. I remember there were a few times where I got out of sticky situations early on in the story by just putting my Phoebe to face tank.
Yes.
Because she's got that innate tankiness and she
Yeah.
revives. She's going to buy you time to establish your board. And every time your unit gets hit, you get rage. An extra attack off can be the difference sometimes. So yeah, creativity in your unit placement is also a good way to get out of sticky situations.
I have definitely done my time when pretty much like I'll drop my Miyuki, just by herself on some boards, and just later like take a beating just so I can get that rage meter going
Yeah,
off a
just so
couple
you
of
can get the
times.
extra attack off. And
Oh yeah.
sometimes leaving your leader open
Yep.
just to take the first 2 hits of the fight can buy you enough time as well.
Yep. I try to do certain things where I'll actually place certain units just so I can get enough energy cost to slam a bunch of units at the same time. And I'll be like, and of course, like look of the draw sometimes. That way I'm like, all right, this is pretty much going in a way where I'm not like trying to go energy for energy just to keep my leader alive. Because I had that issue quite like a number of times where it's like, I summon something and it instantly dies, where it's better to just summon something, just let it sit. Go into the next thing. When to use currency cards. This one's like pretty hard though.
We should explain how currency cards work first, though. So you have what you call your Musipula. I think that's how you say it, but it's
Yeah.
essentially the house where your resources are generated.
Mm-hmm.
What the currency cards do is they take your hourly output value and they give it to you in advance. So you can probably gather that if you use those currency cards when you're level 1 and you haven't upgraded any of your Musipula, your resources, you're not really getting anything from those cards compared to if you use them at like account level 60, maybe 50 times the resources from that card.
Oh, more than
More than that, yeah. So for these currency cards, like don't be just hold on to them for a little bit. Only use them if you really need to hit a breakpoint. Other than that, try not to use them. Try and keep them for when you can't push your account level any further.
That makes sense.
that's honestly the best thing to do.
So just hold on to them for dear life as long as possible. If you can. Make sure to save them. Alright, next thing. What is the gate usually for early game? Like, what is the resource that you guys felt? And I'll say mine for this one. Honestly, in my head, I thought the first resource that I needed the most was characters, which is really weird to say. So I summoned like hell. What about you guys?
Resource gates happen in different stages, and you'll know where you're at based on the resource gates you have.
Mm-hmm.
So the first main resource gate, like you said, summoning, yeah. So if you don't whale, then yeah, you want to get a few summons in just to get those dues for RNSR's unit. But the first like resource gate you're gonna hit is gonna be gold.
Okay.
That's gonna rotate out into crystals at one point because your municipal or municipala, whatever it is gonna start costing really expensive.
Yeah.
And your upgrades are gonna take upwards to like 18 plus hours, but you also have to upgrade your leader who's costing up to 2 million to do a few levels on each of his skills, but your
Yikes.
municipala is costing 2 million per upgrade, and you're only netting 1.5 million overnight.
Yeah.
So it starts really adding up, and crystals was like a gigantic gate because it lets me have more XP and more gold, but at the same time I needed to boost my leader for power. So that was the biggest one I had in the middle. And now it's XP because once you upgrade units, the amount of XP is unreal. It takes me 909 purple pots just to level up a unit from 170 to 200. So XP is becoming a gigantic gate now. So they go into kind of stages.
That makes sense. So pretty much like early game is gold, mid game is pretty much crystals, late game is pretty much EXP, right? Bamco, you got anything for that one?
I agree with that. Yeah, gold is definitely the big early gate. Crystals does become quite pronounced. Obviously, you're trying to look where you can get extra power for your comp. You start looking at your halos, but you also need to keep on top of your Musipula. So crystals do become a problem, and then it is definitely EXP late game there.
But always upgrade your municipala first. If you want to upgrade your leader, just hold the urge. I know you want the power spike, but if you care about your account long term for more than a month, then you're going to do your municipala because that you're thinking forward about the XP problem you're going to have next. So the sooner you upgrade that, the more XP you're netting in, the earlier, right? Like that's what you want to do.
Yeah, you're essentially just building interest. You're getting inflation on everything. So in the long run, even though you don't get the initial benefits, in the long term, you'll like benefit much greater. All right.
Yes. Correct.
Let's go to the next one. So we pretty much covered early and mid game. Another one is going to be, why are some people progressing faster than others? I'll take this one just a little bit. I think like a lot of misconception is that, people are just like wailing and summoning. That is pretty true, but another thing is going to be the time difference, as in like when did you start playing the game? Because a lot of it's going to be like, have you accumulated enough resources? And like when you started the game, what was your like main focus, right? Did you just rush content,
Mhm.
or did you kind of just like summon heroes and then wait a couple days before doing anything?
Is one of the things you have to consider buying bread, because that's going to be a big thing. Like one of the big problems that whales can buy bread with cash.
Yeah.
But as a free to play player, I know it sucks to say, oh, I'm going to have to refresh for 50 gems, then 100 gems, then 150 gems. But if you're wasting all your gems for pulls and not wasting gems for stamina, then you're making a big mistake for your account, because at one point, pulls have really hard diminishing returns, especially like unit pulls. And it's not beneficial for your account, because one, you're not pulling enough to get enough lost mirror to upgrade your units to lens them up, so it's just wasting gems that just sit in your inventory. And at least buying stamina is something that like actively is working your account farther. You'll get to a point where I'm at, where I was explaining before, it takes me 1 day of just full 5 times stamina refill only lets me upgrade 2 units to level 200. Once I do up to level 240, it's going to be about a day to a day and a half of full stam refresh. And to get to 300, it takes you 2 days of stamina refreshes 5 times just to get the links to upgrade to level 300. So if you're not saving gems to be refreshing for stamina, then as a free to play player, you're going to be waiting a while to do some of your unit upgrades. It is really, really good to spend gems on resources. Very useful.
Yeah, sorry. What I was going to say was having a plan is really important for progression. If you're just upgrading all of your units, using all of your lost mirror on all the lens upgrades, you're going to hit a wall. You need to have a solid plan of what you want your comp to be and stick to it.
Stamina refreshes in the beginning are just going to be key, not because you're progressing through content per se. It's mainly to get those Miscipula and resource upgrades as fast as possible. Like pretty much it keeps flowing to the original thing that we keep saying, is like those resources are going to be the gap in the later game, right? Of course, in the early game, it doesn't really affect you too much because you have everything in the world and you can just like, buy it if you really want to. But later on, you're just going to really feel the pain and you're going to be like, man, if I only did this a little bit sooner, got my Miscipula upgrades just a little bit sooner, maybe I would have been just a smidge bit farther than everyone else, right?
That's exactly
Mhm.
it. And the
Yeah.
sooner you upgrade those resources, it's exponential on how you gain compared to if you waited like a day to upgrade them. It
It really
cascades.
is big. It almost doubles. Like with every level, you're getting just a little shy under doubling your income. It's really nutty.
What are your priorities for Illusion Connect? And I think this is kind of like a loaded question, and we've sort of answered this. One of the main priorities in the very beginning is, like we said, is like tackle content, make sure to level up Muscipula, make sure to plan out your team. But it's not in the sense of like, hey, you need to just save your diamonds like a madman. I think there are some cases in Illusion Connect where you can make strategic plays with your diamonds, in the sense of like, hey, if I invest in stamina right now, it'll give me a huge payout in the future, because
Yeah.
stamina is a very, very limited resource, I would say.
Every day you don't stamina refresh is a bunch of bread you're never gonna get back, and there's gonna come a point where you're gonna be like, man, if only I had 100 more bread, if only I had 300 more bread, if only I had this much more bread. I
Yeah.
wailed and picked up most of the packs for the bread, and I'm still like, I'm wishing I had more bread. There were days that I didn't refresh bread because I didn't think I needed it, and now I kind of regret not doing it.
As like a free to play, it depends on what kind of competitive level that you want to stay at. Like if you want to stay within top, like 1000 or what have you, do 2 refreshes a day. If you want to be more
Yeah.
aggressive and you want to like tackle content, you want to be in top 100 or something, then do like 3 or 4, maybe even 5. Just know, whoever, it's not even about whaling at some points, it's about how long have you been playing. So I don't want people to get fixated on like, hey, I need to whale on stamina. I think it's just more along the lines of, where do I want to sit with everyone else so that I can also join the conversation of like, I'm progressing through content. Because I don't think technically, since Illusion Connect, it's been out in global for like a week and a half or 2 weeks. So like
Yeah.
if you're behind, just don't compare yourselves to like the top 10 players because
We had somebody in our guild that's free to play. I think it was like over 200k
wow.
power, and like I only accept people that are over 200k power, and
Mhm.
he was like 227 or something like that, free to play. Like you can be top 50 and free to play. Like I think I've seen some people in the top 20 in our leaderboards every here and then that were free to play at some point. If you just spend your stuff right and you're not like fixating on pulls and getting units, like, and you get a little bit of luck with your pulls for some like pan dupes and some Rikia dupes maybe, or some sorks that you want, like you'll do fine if you're smart with your resources.
Bamco, you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I'm thinking more about the 2 stam refreshes a day.
Okay.
Because I think, yeah, we did some calculations and that was most free to play players can do that without taking a loss to their diamonds. Now that we have Guild Crusade, if I'm not wrong, I believe we do get diamonds from there as well. So that's another source.
Yeah.
So you might be able to consider pushing that 2 to 3 up, two stam refreshes a day to 3 if free to play.
Mm.
I'm not 100% sure, but if you get enough diamonds from things like Crusade and Arena, then just make sure you plan how much you're getting a day and try and spend them on stamina.
You should also spend on exchange link medals in the exchange shop. I know that's going to sound kind of like sketch, but they cost 45,000 gold or 36 gems, and it's 100 gems for the first refresh. I would consider doing one refresh, and the reason for this is those link medals are stam that you're saving, right? Because right now these are all the link medals that I'm getting for when I have to upgrade to 300, and I need 140 of them, and I'm already at 90 plus for 3 different classes. That's 3 units less I will have to manually farm and waste stam on to upgrade.
Okay, so it's more of like a late game thing, that sort of deal. Because
Yeah.
I was always wondering in the early game, like, this seems sort of useless. But in the late game, that does make sense because stamina is finite, where in some cases, gold can be more infinite. You have more ways to access it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and if you're not spending 1,800 on pulls, well, if you save 1,800, that's a lot of exchange shop stuff you can buy. If they cost 36 gems and 100 for a refresh, like you can get a good amount of your stuff. And frankly, if you do a bad pull with just like a bunch of R's and one SR, like I'd much rather you spend it on this because that's more value on your account of stamina saved.
Yeah. So we should probably explain this a little bit too. Those medals that you do see populated in the exchange store, they're based on your account level. That also means that once you get to a high enough level, so like level 60 account level, you can start getting the medals for the next tier of unit upgrades, even though you can't farm them in game.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. I'm getting like stage 17 medals, but stage 17 is not out yet. That's what I'm farming currently. And that's how I was able to get units at level 200 before the content came out.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That makes sense, and that's probably something that most people won't look into as a normal player, I would say, but it definitely makes sense to be aware of it in the future. Because let's say you don't even have that content now. Later on, like for example, if once we are like a month or two down the road, and you are struggling in that place, you can take this advice and you can move forward with it. I will say in the beginning though, it's obviously offset because you only need like 40 or like 30 or 20, 10 medals. Of course, you guys are needing like 140 or 200.
You should do it for the 170 medals and up. That's when I started doing it. Was the
170
upgrade
and
from
up.
I think like you need when you're at level 140, you need medals to get to 170, like to unlock it. Like those
Yeah.
are the medals I started.
It's
So any
nasty.
stam you can save in the exchange shop is good. It's worth it, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's just 45k gold, which is nothing now with the amount of resources you gain. Like I gain 100k an hour.
All right, let's cover the last question, which is the best thing to do as a free to play. Like, what is your number one advice?
Don't be afraid to use what the game gave you, right? There are some SR units, there are some rare units that aren't the worst in the world, and you could probably find them in your comp doing work.
Oh yeah.
So there are units like N that I actually rate pretty highly, where they can actually really hard carry you for a lot of the early game.
Oh yeah.
So if the game gives you 3-star Annie, you're like, damn, I didn't get pan. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
My biggest recommendation, and this is more of like a what not to do, and this is a very controversial one. Don't upgrade poly.
Really?
I see this one so often.
Really?
Everybody's like upgrade poly. It is like the noob trap. That is like the mouse trap waiting for you to get the squeaky cheese. Like it is, because if you look, her health, if I'm not mistaken, Bamco, right when we were reviewing her, scales off her attack, and because she's a 4-star unit, her attack scaling is never going to be as high as stuff like 5-star and 6-star units as you progress later into the game. And she's going to have a significant fall off, and you're going to have wasted all these resources on her. And what did we just say was like the most important thing for like the past like
Resources.
5 question? Resources. So it's like she's like a waste, like just a
Wow.
huge resource waste that you're going to have to replace at one point. And another one that I kind of think is falling into that trap but is more manageable is Beatrice. At least she's an SR and she does decent damage, but she's one that I don't recommend building that everybody's saying is fantastic. Um, the reason why I'd say is kind of like a sketchy one to build is because she requires you to let the enemy fill up their board with tanks, healers, and light units, which are like 3 of the things you don't want them filling up their board on, because tanks are hard to kill and healers will heal up all the other units that were on there that you may not have finished off, just for this one unit to be really strong when you could just use your free-to-play Miyuki you get on day 8. That will be like really strong already with its AoE, and you don't have to wait for anything.
Yeah,
And
so
you don't have a 30% chance to rage down. You automatically rage down. Otherwise, Beatrice is like a 30% chance, so you're gambling all the time for her stun.
yeah. Unfortunately, with Beatrice, she's of the spell classification as well, so she'll be competing with Rikia and Miyuki for spots in some teams, and that's
Yeah.
just competition that she's not going to beat.
Yeah, the Rikia and Miku are just too amazing. They're just too good.
That's true.
In what they do, especially if you look at, like we talked about, Sork comps, over half your team is filled with Sorks. You don't have any leftover slots left for other units, so you have to be very careful with who you pick. And unfortunately, a lot of units just fall short in the competition for those key limited slots that are left over in team comps.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's pretty much like you can use poly like maybe for like up to like chapter 9 possibly, because my general rule of thumb is if you're like trying to just push content, don't level a character past like 60, and even then technically that's pushing it. But if you get like hard set on upgrading a character past 60, that's when I feel like you need to slow your roll just a little bit,
Yeah.
because the resources down the road, like for example, if you got Beatrice to 120, there's no takebacks on that, and that's a lot of stamina, to be frank, and a lot of gold.
I mean, 120 you can kind of tape back once you're doing 240 stuff because the gold's pretty nice, but like you're gonna get to a point where it's like if you've upgraded your poly too far, and you're not gonna see it yet, but like chapter 16 is starting to see some difficulty even for me. It was hard for me to 3-star certain stages. I like restarted lit like 6-7 times, if not more. I asked Bamco on one of them. Like 17 is gonna get hard, 18 is gonna get hard, and you don't see that your unit can't carry its own weight. You're going to see that the unit can't carry its own weight when you start hitting those stages. It's going to become very apparent that you're going to be like, oh, I really messed up on what I leveled, because the early content is not accurate to what comes up into the future and will make some units look really good. The best example of this is Ashwaya. I solo cleared chapter 1 to 5 with just Ashwaya and another account for fun. She solo cleared every mission. I didn't need another unit just because she fills up the board and units are too weak to do enough damage to kill the minions. So I won by having a full board of just units that attack. Does not make her a good unit. She's actually really, really bad in the future. She hurts your team in the future by filling up the board like that.
Oh yeah.
So early content is not representative of content that comes up. So don't let it, I guess, fool you for what units may look good, but they're really not later on. The only R I think that's worth keeping around is Re. Re is probably the big one, and I think Carol, Re, Mary for some free-to-play sword comps if you haven't pulled the ones you want, and Carol has some use later on in Crusade as well for the big damage down debuff she gets. Those are like the 3 biggest R units that say have like potential to keep. The 2 of those you wouldn't even do as first levels. Like Carol is something you do later on once you have your first team at max level 300, but Re and Mary are free-to-play units that you could level, and that would be acceptable, especially Re. You can bring her to 300, and it's totally fine if you don't have Shiki.
Yeah,
it's completely fine.
No, then I have to say Re is definitely the hardest hitting like rare unit I've seen in the game because of her enrage ability where she deals like that 100% multiplier, and I just kind of lose my mind.
So, that 100% multiplier, by the way, is like double damage. Like it says 100%, but that the way damage is calculated in the formula, it acts as basically multiplying your attack percent twice almost. because damage is calculated after. So it's basically what your attack does with the percentage is your damage, and then that gets multiplied by a whole other 100%, basically making it 2 times.
Okay.
It's additive in that sense. So you do your attack, that's calculated first, and then it adds the attack value again.
So it's basically actually doing like 560% of your attack. That's basically what it's doing. If it affects frenzy, it's the same for Shiki.
I think that pretty much covers like the best things to do as a free to play. I think it just boils down to like, hey, have a plan in the future and save your resources and just mitigate everything. And just don't get hard set on a character that's performing really well in the first 5 chapters, because it's not really an indicator of what's coming down the road.
No.
Do you guys have anything else left? Do you guys want to do anything? All right.
Yeah, I think that covers everything.
That covers it then.